Hey everybody, it's the Professor, and once again, it's the one and only Blue Pill Professor, coming at you from the internet and talking to you about the things we really care about, namely, the nature of women, and what we are all going to do about it now that we have awoken from our long slumber.
Been dazed and confused for so long, it's not true. Wanted a woman, never bargained for you. Lots of people talking, few of them know. Soul of a woman was created below.
And this week, on the question of whether a woman's soul was truly created below, we can get straight to the topic because we are going to talk today about DreadGame. And when I tell you about DreadGame, you will understand, indeed, a woman's soul was created below. Because, guys, let me tell you, DreadGame works. DreadGame is the shit. DreadGame is an incredibly powerful tool in your arsenal. And I would argue it may even be the only tool that you need if your goal is to restore your low-sex marriage. If you want to know why or how or evidence showing that a woman's soul was created below, look at the success of DreadGame. Because using DreadGame, we are manipulating very subtle, deep magic, sexual triggers that are inside every woman that can be covertly brought out in order to turn your woman into something very different than what she is today. Yet it is a backhanded, some might even say malicious attack on the female psyche. So the fact that DreadGame works so well that when properly applied, a woman who has the dread literally drips gobber snot from her crotch all the way to the floor. Yes, I said it. DreadGame makes women wet. They would never admit it, and it's not what you want to talk about in polite company, but it is the case. And I believe DreadGame alone shows that a woman's soul was indeed created below. So let's get started and let's talk about what is this concept of DreadGame. Well, last week or a couple weeks ago on this podcast series, we talked about the concept of game. And game, as you will recall, is a set of behavioral adaptations that you can engage in that will maximize your sexual attractiveness to the opposite sex. And we talked about a number of different types of game. The typical beta game of bringing her flowers. We mentioned briefly girl game, a woman being sweet and cute, flicking her hair and so on. And we described the concept of alpha game. That is, being the alpha that women want to fuck. Well, we talked earlier in this series about the fact that women want what other women have. This is a natural human characteristic. Of course, men want what other men have as well. I believe that's one of the commandments, in fact. You're not supposed to covet. So obviously this has been a problem for quite some time with the human species. But with women, what they covet is somewhat different than what men covet. Because women are hugely dependent on directions from the herd. The herd of other females telling them what to do, what to think, what fashions to wear. Women are influenced heavily by the decisions and preferences of other women. This is true in fashion, and yes, it is true in matters of love. Women, subconsciously and many times consciously, prefer men who are wanted by other women. They are pre-approved by other women. So if a man walks into a bar with a pretty girl on his arm, he is much more likely to get attention from other women in the bar because this is a guy who's already pre-approved by a desirable woman. And that, guys, is exactly how it works in your marriage. If you are not approved by other women, it is very difficult for your wife to find you attractive because one of the primary cues that women use to determine, in fact, if a man is attractive, is the opinions of other women. So if you do not have other women who approve of you, you are at a huge disadvantage in the sexual mating game. And you're probably listening to this series because you are in a low-sex marriage where your wife does not believe that you are approved by other women. So let's begin turning that around right now. But first, I want to tell you, before I tell you exactly what dread is and how to achieve it, I want to tell you what is not dread, okay? What is not dread? Well, dread is not fear. Fear is too strong. That is not what we're trying to do, to put our women in fear that, oh, I have to have sex with him or he might leave me. That is not dread. Dread is the subtle, in the back of the mind feeling and knowledge that, in fact, you are with a high-value man who is desired by other women. That's it. Dread is not pain. It is not fake desire. Abusive. Dread is in the background. And that is why when I talk about the levels of dread, I talk about implementing them one level at a time. Go slowly. Build up the dread over months not weeks, certainly not days. And I want to also point out that what happens with properly applied dread, that is, your woman getting very wet and horny and wanting to fuck you, many guys misinterpret this as this fake passion. Oh, she's scared that I'm going to leave, so she's just throwing me a bone. And you're missing the point when you think that. Because with properly applied dread, women get horny. It's a legitimate, actual physical and biological reaction to them being with a man who is pre-approved by other women. It is not fake, and it is not throwing you a bone. So we got that out of the way. What is not dread? What is dread? Again, dread is a slight, covert anxiety, and it is nothing more than the realization on the part of the woman that she is in fact with a high-value man who is desired by other women. And once you have a woman who gets the dread, just this little thought in the back of her head, typically the low-sex marriage turns around almost overnight. And you just want her to have a hint of the dread. Not a massive, terrified reaction, but a hint, a whiff of the dread, as we say. So I can't emphasize it enough because a lot of guys on Married Red Pill have frankly fucked this up royally by moving too quickly and doing dread overtly. In other words, sitting down and telling your wife what it is that you're doing. You cannot tell your wife what you are doing. You simply do it. Actus non verba is our slogan on Married Red Pill. In Latin, it means actions, not words. Don't talk about how you could fuck this girl or that girl. Show her by flirting and various things of that nature. But do it covertly and do it in the background. And the next thing I want to talk about is the dangers of dread, because these have been fairly well characterized on the blog Married Red Pill. I've been a moderator of this blog for about a year. My post on the 12 levels of dread has been up for about that long, and literally thousands and thousands of men have used this order and methodology that I propose in that post, and which I later expanded into my soon-to-be best-selling book, Saving a Low-Sex Marriage, A Man's Guide to Dread, Seduction, and the Long Game. And of those thousands of men who have implemented the 12 levels of dread, most of them have seen a marked improvement in their marriage. And the men who have not, it's obvious what they've done. They've done it too quickly. They've moved too quickly. And it's not a subtle, I moved a little bit quick. No, these guys, oftentimes they started out at level 1, which we'll cover in the next podcast. And then, boom, they accelerate all the way to level 11. I'm out of here. Fuck me or fuck you. Well, if you do that, the result is going to be predictable. But if you follow the advice that we give you and do this slowly and inexorably over months, over at least a year, it is highly likely that you will be able to restore your low-sex marriage. However, there are some significant dangers of implementing DreadGame. One of the dangers is the wife might check out if you move too quickly. She can't keep up. She can't deal with all the changes, and you've already been a putz for quite a few years. Anyway, if you've been the drunk captain and you move too quickly, things might go very badly for you. I've also heard a suggestion that the wife might check out if you move too slowly. However, we have actually not seen this case very often, if at all, on Married Red Pill. In fact, it is quite unusual for a woman to decide to go through with a divorce with a man who is improving. Women can't stand to leave loose ends untidy. And she's always thinking in the back of her mind, boy, I'm with a guy who's improving, he's getting better. What if he gets really good? And I left him and screwed it up. I don't know if that's really what they think, but it sure as hell seems that way. Because we really have yet to see a woman leave a man who's improving. What we see much more commonly, however, is the man deciding to check out. The husband is implementing DreadGame, and he is faking this, what we call an IDGAF attitude. In other words, I don't give a fuck attitude, which is very attractive to women. Well, if you fake it long enough, we say fake it till you make it. But if you fake it long enough, it may just become reality, where you really don't give a fuck whether this sex-denying, shrill harpy of a wife who disrespects you in front of the kids is worth it, especially now that you are a higher value man as you move up through the levels of dread. And not only are you putting in your wife's head that maybe, just maybe, you are attractive to other women, you are, at some of the later stages of dread, you are actively cultivating interest in other women. And then when you get that interest from another woman, who's younger, prettier, hotter, and sweeter than your wife, well, you can see just what might happen and what we've seen happen over and over again. If you implement dread, be prepared for you eventually to check out if your wife does not respond. Because your I don't give a fuck attitude eventually is not going to be an act anymore. And conversely, that will be when you're most attractive to your wife sexually, while she is least attractive to you sexually. So there's an old Jewish proverb about marriage being two couples dancing on the edge of a knife, and I'm here to tell you that dread is dancing on the edge of a knife. You must keep your dread in the Goldilocks range. It cannot be too much, it cannot be too little, and you have to constantly be adjusting it, backing off sometimes and moving forward other times. But the bottom line is the implementation of dread must be slow, deliberate, and measured. And I would also say it must be inexorable. You are moving forward and you are becoming more attractive whether she responds or not. Next, I want to tell you about the difference between passive and active dread. Now, over the next 2 podcasts, we're going to be going over my post on and book on the 12 steps of dread. And there is a very clear line of demarcation in those levels, specifically level 5. A normal, happy, fruitful relationship is always at dread level 5. And this is also the line between passive and active dread. After dread level 5, we begin engaging in active dread rather than just passive types of dread. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that the first 5 levels of dread are personal self-improvement steps. But after level 5, we move from passive dread to active dread and actively begin showing your wife that you are in fact desirable to other women. Again, you're still doing it covertly for the most part. You're not bringing this out in the open, but you do begin to actively put this dread concept into your wife's mind that in fact you are desirable and attractive to other women. So I'll give you an overview right now of the 12 levels of dread, and then over the final 2 podcasts in this Married Red Pill Basic class, we will cover each of these levels in detail. So very briefly, level 1 is responding to shit tests, and we've seen this many times before. Level 2 is developing your MAP. This is a concept borrowed from the MAP, Mindful Attraction Plan, by Ethel Kay. To build your physical, mental, spiritual, economic life and to develop your plan forward. Level 3 is what I call get a life. Get out there, join a club, get busy. In addition to lifting weights, which you began in level 2, because that is the most important thing for getting your physical self in order is to lift weights. And as far as your mental and psychological state, you need to read books on self-improvement, and we have a list of them on the Married Red Pill sidebar and in this podcast series. And so level 3 is getting a life, joining a club, getting busy. Level 4 is when you begin conditioning your availability to your wife to her sexual availability to you. You are busy now and you don't have time for a shrill, sex-denying screech tard. And level 5 is dress up. Level 6 is to begin studying pickup artistry and how to talk to and pick up pretty women. And it usually doesn't hurt to maybe leave a book or 2 lying around on that topic. If that doesn't get her attention, we'll just have to use stronger methods. And level 7 is when we begin practicing our cold approaches with attractive women that we see throughout the day. That is, we start practicing day game. Level 8 is when we put on a performance. We show our wives that we are fully capable of attracting a woman who is younger and prettier and less hefty around the waist, if you know what I mean, than her. And if that doesn't get her attention, doing that a couple of times when you go out, then again, you need to use even stronger measures. And I recommend you go to what Ethel Kay's level 5 and what is my dread level 9, the soft ultimatum. Not really covert yet, not taking it on, but wistfully mentioning what you are going to need to stay in the marriage. And if that doesn't get her attention, you will need to accelerate to level 10, which is the fuck me or fuck you speech. And again, that is after at least a year of self-improvement. And then levels 11 and 12 I originally wrote them as almost comedic relief. But it turns out that levels 11 and 12 actually work quite well to restore many marriages. And levels 11 is when you give up on your situation and you can file for divorce, as you threatened to do in level 10, or you can stay with her and simply get a girlfriend to satisfy your sexual needs. And then finally, level 12 is when you tell your wife about your girlfriend. Now you can see each of these levels builds on the other, and you can't go starting with level 1 or 2 and then skipping to 7 or 8. You have to do each one sequentially for at least a month. And next week, we will talk about these specifically in greater detail. We'll do that for the next 2 weeks, and then we will end this series, and you will have graduated from this Married Red Pill Basic class. And that music means my time is up, so as always, I leave you with the incomparable wisdom and words of Robert Plant and Led Zeppelin.
When all your ears have turned away, But now's the time to look and look again at what you see. Is that the way it ought to stay?